I thought I was just the old mother tagging along on one last family trip. But under the cold airport fluorescence, my daughter-in-law swung her hand, and my son just stood there. They did not know what I had planned after that slap. By the final boarding call, everything in our lives had changed forever. My name is Maggie Ellison, and I am 62 years old. I stood under the hazy morning light of O'Hare, caught between two diverging streams of travellers at gate B12. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and jet fuel. Above, the public address system called out boarding groups, a detached voice competing with the relentless click-clack of roller bags on the terminal floor. It felt like 1,000 tiny countdown timers. Sloane, my daughter-in-law, was vibrating with an acidic energy. She was all sharp angles, expensive perfume, and impatience. She tossed her passport onto the check-in counter, the small blue book skidding to a stop. "You're not coming with us?" Her voice was low, meant only for me, but it cut through the airport noise like a shard of glass. And then, her hand moved. It was a blur, fast and impulsive, fueled by a frustration that had been building for months. The sound was a sharp crack that seemed to silence the terminal for a fraction of a second. The impact sent a shockwave of heat across my left cheek. My glasses skittered on my nose, settling crookedly. The sting was immediate, a bright, blooming fire that brought tears to my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. My son, Caleb, stood 3 feet away. He heard it. He must have. But his gaze dropped, magnetized to the check-in application on his phone, his thumb swiping, swiping, swiping. He was checking them in for their vacation, but he was checking out of this moment. He refused to be a witness. He made himself invisible. The gate agent, a young woman with a crisp blue uniform and a practiced smile, froze. Her smile vanished. Her mouth opened slightly, her eyes darting from me to Sloane, and then to the red mark already forming on my face. In the periphery, the movement changed. The river of travellers slowed, forming an eddy around us. The murmur of the crowd shifted pitch. I saw them, 2, maybe 3 phones, lifted from the anonymous mass, their dark screens turning toward the spectacle. We were no longer a family having a disagreement. We were content now. I lifted my hand, my fingers trembling only slightly, and pressed them gently against the stinging heat. The skin felt alien, stretched too tight. I didn't look at Sloane. I didn't look at Caleb. Instead, I found the small, domed security camera mounted on the wall near the jet bridge. I looked directly into its unwavering lens, burning the moment into the airport's digital memory. I wanted this documented. I wanted an impartial witness. Sloane was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling, energized by her own cruelty. As I lowered my hand, my purse, heavy on my shoulder, shifted. From the unzipped opening of the leather bag, the corner of a single ticket pushed itself into view. It was printed on heavy cardstock, a deep blue, and the words, "First Class," were clearly visible. Sloane's eyes, still bright with anger, locked onto it. A flicker of confusion, quickly followed by suspicion, crossed her face. I quickly, deliberately, used my thumb to push the ticket back down into the depths of my bag, hiding it from view. The murmuring around us grew louder. A man in a dark suit with an airport security badge stepped forward, moving with practiced, non-threatening calm. "Ma'am," he said, addressing me, his voice professional. "Is everything all right? Do you need assistance?" I kept my voice low, barely a whisper, forcing him to lean in. Give me a few minutes. I looked past him, at the faces of my son and daughter-in-law. This needs to end correctly. The security guard hesitated, unsure. The beep of the gate agent's scanner suddenly sounded as loud as a siren as she processed Sloane's passport. Beep. Beep. My heart hammered against my ribs. A trapped bird. The rhythm of it. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. Suddenly synchronized with that scanner. It pulled me back. Beep. The sound of the scanner dissolved. It was no longer a QR code. It was the steady, agonizing beep of the heart monitor in Arthur's hospital room, just before it became one long, unbroken tone. Thump, thump. It was the sound of the first handful of damp earth hitting the polished wood of his casket. The sky over Lake Haven, Illinois, had been a uniform, oppressive grey. It was the colour of lead, the colour of a life scrubbed of all vibrancy. I remembered standing by that open grave, the wind whipping my hair across my face, and Caleb had stood exactly as he was standing now, 3 feet away, looking at his phone, refusing to see the reality right in front of him. Sloane had been there too, clutching his arm, her grief performative, her whispers already focused on the future. The house is too big for her, she had murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. We'll have to sell. It's the only practical thing. Beep. The sound snapped me back to the present. The gate agent was scanning Caleb's phone. The heat on my cheek was real. The phones filming us were real. And the first-class ticket in my bag was the realest thing of all. After Arthur's funeral, the silence in our Lake Haven house was too heavy to bear. The rooms were full of his absence, the air thin. Come stay with us, Mum, Caleb had said, his voice practical, efficient. Just for a while. You shouldn't be alone. Sloane had nodded, a tight, fixed smile that didn't reach her eyes. So, for company. I sold Arthur's old sedan, packed 3 suitcases, and moved into the beige guest room of their sleek, modern townhouse. The house was a box of grey, chrome, and glass. It smelled perpetually of expensive scented candles, some abstract scent like sandalwood and rain. It was a house governed by unspoken laws, the primary one being that all objects must disappear after use. A coffee mug left on the counter was a personal offence. My reading glasses on the end table were clutter. I learned quickly to live out of my 3 suitcases, minimizing my own presence, folding myself small to fit into the sterile spaces they had created. My attempts to contribute were treated as intrusions. Sloane, a woman who curated her life like an Instagram feed, scrutinized everything. The morning I tried to make breakfast, she sighed loudly. The coffee I'd brewed was too weak. The eggs were too salty. Mum, please don't use my espresso machine, she said later that week, her voice strained. The settings are calibrated. Caleb was a ghost in this polished house. He left before 7 in the morning for the city and returned long after the dinner I had prepared had grown cold. Sorry, Mom, he would murmur, his eyes already locked on his phone. Scrolling. Conroy is just killing me with this quarter's KPIs. You understand. I understood that I was now the unpaid, unseen housekeeper. I did the laundry they left piled by their door. I ran the dishwasher. I took their nervous, overbred dog for walks in the manicured neighbourhood. It was on one of those walks that I met a neighbour, a pleasant woman named Mrs. Davies. She was complaining good-naturedly about the subdivision. $1,900 a month for this, she'd lamented, gesturing to her identical townhouse. It's highway robbery. A cold pit formed in my stomach. I must have looked surprised. Oh, she said. I'm sorry. You're just visiting. I'm Caleb's mother, I replied. I'm staying with him. Ah, she said, her tone shifting. Well, he's the lucky one, isn't he? Got that deal from the landlord? I just nodded, the coldness spreading. That night, I overheard Caleb complaining to Sloane about a utility bill. We can't complain. Slow, he'd said. $8.50 is a steal. We just have to keep quiet. $850, less than half. Arthur had always been so proud of finding deals, of taking care of Caleb. I was beginning to see the shape of that care. The house was quiet, but the walls were thin. Their bedroom was directly above mine. I was reading, trying to ignore the muffled sound of their television, when I heard Sloane's voice, sharp and clear. Caleb, you have to get her off this Florida trip. I am not spending 7 days sharing a condo with her. I can't stand it. Get her out of it. I waited. My breath held. For Caleb's defense. I waited for him to say, She's my mother. Sloane. She just lost her husband. A pause. Then, Caleb's muffled, conceding tone. I'll handle it. I sat on the edge of the too-firm guest bed. I picked up the small, framed photo of Arthur I kept on the nightstand. It was from our trip to the coast, his face weathered and smiling into the sun. Arthur, I whispered to the empty grey room. What did I miss? What didn't I see in our own home? A week later, a small spark of light. An email arrived from the Skyline County Archives, where I had worked for 25 years before retiring to care for Arthur. They were digitizing a new collection and wanted me back, part-time. Just 20 hours a week. Maggie. Nobody knows the zoning files like you. I mentioned it at dinner, a flicker of my old self returning. Sloane didn't even look up from her salad. That's nice. Mum. But really, you're best suited for dog-sitting. It's less stress. The stress, however, was not mine. It was Sloane's, and it was mounting. She was on edge about her work, about the upcoming trip, about my lingering presence. One evening, I was moving a heavy pot of boiling water from the stove to the sink to drain pasta. She rushed into the kitchen, late for an online meeting, needing ice. Move, she snapped. And instead of waiting, she grabbed the pot handle my hand was still on the other side and yanked it toward her. Sloane. Boiling water sloshed onto the stove. My wrist, caught between the pot and her force, slammed against the granite countertop. I cried out, a sharp intake of breath. She didn't stop. You are always in the way, she hissed, grabbing her ice and storming out. Later that night, I looked at the bruise already forming a dark, ugly purple stain just below my watch. When Caleb finally came home, I showed him. He winced, then looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I was in a meeting. Mum. A big one. I didn't see it. He took a breath. Sloane is just stressed. That was the moment. The realization settled over me, heavy as a shroud. I was not family. I was an obstacle. I went into the kitchen, loaded the dishes from the dinner I had cooked, and they had barely touched, and turned on the dishwasher. The machine roared to life, a high-pitched mechanical hum, I leaned against the counter, the vibration running through my hands, and I finally let out the sob I had been holding since the funeral. It was a single, ragged gasp, completely swallowed by the sound of the rinse cycle. That bruise on my wrist was a compass. It pointed away from the woman I had been the grieving, accommodating widow and towards someone else. I stopped tidying their lives and began sorting through the wreckage of my own. While they were at work, I went into the guest room, to the closet where my 3 suitcases sat stacked like a monument to my temporary status. I pulled down the oldest one, a heavy, hard-sided Samsonite that Arthur had used for his business trips. I had packed my old life into it in a grief-stricken hurry. I pulled back the fabric lining, and my fingers hit the cold, thin edge of a metal document box. The key was taped to the underside. I clicked the lock, and the lid hissed open. Inside, there was no sentiment, just Arthur's meticulous organization. There was a single, handwritten letter on his thick, cream-colored stationery, and a small, silver USB drive. Maggie, the letter began, and the sight of his handwriting made my throat close. If you are reading this, I am gone, and I am sorry. I have spent our life protecting you, and perhaps I protected Caleb too much as well. I shielded him from consequence, and I fear I have left you with the result. My hands were shaking. He explained that, years ago, he had quietly structured his assets into a limited liability company, Marigold Holdings. It was not meant to be deceptive. It was meant to protect the properties from being seen as a casual inheritance. He hadn't wanted Caleb to grow up with the lazy entitlement of a rich kid. The letter stated, in stark legal terms, that upon his death, the full and sole managing rights of Marigold Holdings, LLC, transferred to me, Margaret Ellison. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop, the screen filled with folders, leases, tax filings, assets. Marigold Holdings was not a small venture. It owned 4 buildings, and, my breath caught, 2 retail franchise agreements at O'Hare International Airport. I clicked on the residential leases folder. I saw the address for the sleek, grey townhouse I was sitting in. I opened the file. There was Caleb's name on the rental agreement, and there was the rent, $850. I saw the market rate spreadsheet in the next file. Mrs. Davies was right. $1,900. The deal Caleb had gotten wasn't from some anonymous landlord. It was from his father. He was living in my building, subsidized by my company, while I slept in his guest room and scrubbed his floors. The letter had one final instruction. Do not confront them. Do not show your hand. Call Ira Whitcomb. He managed the trust. He knows everything. I am so sorry I left you this fight. Mags. Win it. Before I called Ira, I did something else. I had seen the thinness of the walls work against me. Now, I would make it work for me. I set my phone to record audio. I placed it in my apron pocket. I waited. That evening, when Sloane came home and complained that the brand of coffee I'd bought was cheap garbage, I had it. When she snapped at me to stay out of the way while she was on a video call, I had it. I captured her telling Caleb, I am not having your mother ruin this trip. I swear to God. I will leave her at the curb. I did not record any children. I only recorded the abuse aimed at me, by her, in our shared home. It was not for a lawsuit. It was my anchor to reality. I met Ira Whitcomb the next day at a diner 20 miles outside the city. He was an older man with kind, sad eyes and a mind like a steel trap. He looked at the letter, reviewed the files on my laptop, and nodded slowly. "It's all ironclad, Maggie," he said, his voice gentle. "You are Marigold Holdings. You are the sole beneficiary. Arthur set this up perfectly." "The townhouse," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The lease." "The preferential lease," Ira corrected, "was contingent on Arthur's status as the living manager. The moment he passed, that agreement became void. They are, legally, month-to-month tenants. You are required to give 30 days' notice before adjusting the rent to the full market rate. Or, he added, before terminating the lease? What do I do? Ira leaned forward. My advice? Maggie. Do nothing. Not as Maggie Ellison. You will sign the notices. You will issue the directives. But you will do it as Marigold Holdings, managing member. You are not their mother. You are their landlord. It was the armor I needed. That same afternoon, I went to a different bank and opened a new business account under the LLC's name, using the documents Ira had waiting for me. I secured a new credit card, linked only to that account. I rented a post office box in the next town over. This would be the new, official address for all Marigold business. The plan began to form, clear and cold as the glass in their townhouse. Sloane wanted me off the Florida trip. She wanted to hit me, to humiliate me, to leave me behind. I looked at the franchise agreements again. O'Hare, a place of transit, of arrivals and departures, a very public place, filled with security, witnesses, and cameras. I would not fight this in their grey living room. I would let the truth come out where there was nowhere to hide. The transformation was a quiet one, internal and cellular. It began the next morning. I went to a salon in a neighbouring town where no one knew me. I told the stylist to cut it all off. The long, sensible, greying hair I had worn in a practical bun for 15 years fell to the floor in clumps. I left with a sharp, chin-length bob that felt light against my neck. I stopped at an optical shop and replaced the thin, wire-rimmed glasses Arthur had liked. I chose a new pair, with bold, dark frames. When I returned to the townhouse, Sloane, who was on her laptop at the kitchen island, just looked up and said, "Huh, bold." Then she looked back down. I went to my room, looked in the mirror, and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked structured, capable. I bought a soft wool suit, the color of morning fog, and a new, structured leather handbag. I looked at my reflection again, this time with the suit on. "Ready," I whispered. My days became compartmentalized. By morning, I was the quiet guest, cleaning up, walking their dog. But my nights, after the house was silent, I was a student. I had enrolled in an intensive online property management course. I sat with my laptop, the blue light illuminating my face, learning about fiduciary responsibility, market rate analysis, and the legal framework of leasing. My old notebooks from the archives were filled again, this time with notes scribbled in the margins, questions for Ira, and flowcharts. The next step was to build a fortress. I drove to a different suburb and bought a new smartphone and a prepaid, unlimited plan. This phone was for Marigold Holdings, not for Maggie Ellison. I called Ira and gave him the number. Then I went online. I accessed my old, shared bank accounts, the ones Sloane had helped me set up after the funeral. I changed every password, every security question. The answers were no longer Arthur's birthday or our anniversary. They were obscure data points from my earliest work at the archives. I locked her out of my life, digitally, one account at a time. A week later, I initiated the first move, with Ira as my legal proxy. I convened a conference call with the property management company that handled Arthur's portfolio. I was just a voice on the line, introduced only as the new managing representative for Marigold. "I have completed a review of the current rent rolls," I said, my voice steady, reading from the script I had rehearsed in front of the mirror. "I am ordering an immediate standardization of all leases. Any and all non-market preferential rates are to be terminated, and new leases are to be issued at the current fair market value, effective at the first possible legal date." There was a slight hesitation from the company's president. "That includes 4 units, ma'am, one of which—" "I am aware of all tenants," I interrupted. "Standardize them all? Send the notifications via certified mail?" The official, legally required 30-day notice arrived at the townhouse on a rainy Tuesday. I was the one who collected the mail. I left the stack on the kitchen island. Sloane's pile of catalogues, Caleb's bills, and the single, crisp white business envelope addressed to Mr. Caleb Ellison and Ms. Sloane Riley. It had no personal return address, only the logo of the management company. I was in my room when the explosion came. I heard the rip of the envelope, a long silence, and then Sloane's voice, a register I had never heard before, high and sharp with pure rage. $1,900. He's raising the rent to $1,900. I heard Caleb's frantic, placating mumble. "It has to be a mistake." "It's a mistake." "Slow. Let me call them. I'll talk to the landlord. I'll sort it out." I closed my eyes, my heart a heavy, steady drum. I heard his side of the conversation 20 minutes later, muffled and frustrated, from the hallway. "But I'm the owner's son. Well, the previous owner. Can I just talk to him or her? It's an emergency." "I see. Just the lawyer." "Thank you." He didn't knock on my door. He didn't come to me for help. He didn't even mention it. That night, I sent a text to my son's phone. My old phone. "Is everything okay?" I heard shouting. I watched the screen. The 3 small dots appeared, pulsed, and then vanished. A minute later, the single, blue check-marked word appeared under my text, "Seen." He had seen it. He just chose not to answer. The next day, I replied to the email from the Skyline County Archives. I accepted their part-time offer, but I dictated my own terms. I would work 20 hours a week, and I would leave every day at 2 p.m. They agreed immediately. In the new journal I had purchased, I wrote one sentence before turning off the light. Kindness does not equal weakness. I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was an employer. I was a landlord. And I was a woman with her own plans. I opened my Marigold Holdings laptop and logged into the new business credit card portal. I had a lot of new corporate points. I looked up the flight to Florida they were so desperate to take. Then, I booked a ticket for myself, first class, for the day before their flight. The first of the month arrived. The new, full market rent was due. I, of course, knew this. I watched my Marigold Holdings business account online. The day passed. No payment. The second day passed. The third. The management company sent the automatic 5-day late notice, per the law. I heard the fight through the wall. Sloane's voice was a drill. "You let this happen. You let this faceless leech do this. It's her," she shrieked. And for a wild second I thought she knew. But then she clarified. It's your mother. She's bad luck. This whole house is poisoned with her bad luck ever since she got here. Caleb's response was a low, desperate murmur. The bad luck was just beginning. My work at the archives was a balm, a return to a life of quiet order. But my real work happened on my new phone, in my calls with Ira. He was reviewing the O'Hare franchise leases. "We have a situation with Bright Bay Retail," Ira said, his voice professional over the line. "They're in Concourse C, one of your most valuable spots. They've missed their last 2 quarterly fee payments. They're in default. Their 5-year lease is up for renewal at the end of this month." A cold, perfect stillness settled over me. Bright Bay Retail. I had heard that name a dozen times from Sloane's own lips. It was her largest client. She wasn't an employee, she was a PR consultant, and they were her main source of income. "Ira," I said, my voice calm. "What are our options? Given their default, we are under no obligation to renew. We can simply let the lease expire and find a new, more reliable tenant. Or we can offer a renewal contingent on them, curing the default immediately and paying a significant penalty." "Sloane mentioned she works for them," I said, letting the words hang in the air. Ira was silent for a beat. He was a good lawyer. "I see. Well, Maggie, as your counsel, I advise that your personal relationships have no bearing on your fiduciary duty to Marigold Holdings. Bright Bay is a bad tenant." "Thank you, Ira," I said. "Please inform Bright Bay that given their default, Marigold Holdings will not be offering a renewal of their lease. We will be soliciting new applicants for the space, effective immediately." The domino tipped over. It took 3 days. The wail from their living room was not a shriek of anger. It was a sound of pure, abject panic. I was walking the dog, and I heard it from the sidewalk. Sloane was on the patio, on her phone, pacing frantically. "What do you mean, terminated? What do you mean, restructuring? You can't cut my contract. My numbers were... I don't give a damn about the O'Hare lease. What does that have to..." "No. No?" Her main source of revenue had evaporated. The corporation, facing the loss of its prime airport location, had made an immediate, ruthless cut to its operating budget. Her contract was the first to go. Now. They were not just 1 month behind on rent. They were a month behind with no visible income on her side at all. The desperation in the house became a physical presence, a sour, metallic smell. I overheard Caleb on the phone in his car, his voice pleading. "I know the rate is 28%. I don't care. I just need it by tomorrow. 8,000. Yes. I'll sign whatever." He was taking a hot, high-interest payday loan just to stop the bleeding. I said nothing. I did not intervene. I simply made my notes. The second month began. The payday loan covered the first month's arrears, but they were already behind on the next payment. The property management company, following my precise, written instructions, proceeded with the next legal step. After 60 days of non-payment and default, a formal eviction process was filed with the county court. This time, the notice was taped to their front door. Caleb, broken, called Ira Whitcomb directly. "You don't understand." I heard him begging into his phone, his voice cracking. "I just need to meet the owner. I need to explain. Our family. We're in a crisis." Ira's reply, as he later relayed to me, was polite and firm. "The owner's privacy is not negotiable. All communication must go through our legal office. We will see you at the eviction hearing." the night before the hearing. Sloane's phone lit up the dark living room. She went live on social media, her face pale and streaked with tears. "We are being exploited." She wept to an audience of 200 anonymous followers. "This heartless, faceless landlord who bought our building is throwing us out. We've been perfect tenants. This is what's wrong with this country. They're just monsters." The comments were a mix of sympathy and pointed questions. As she was broadcasting her victimhood, I was on my Marigold laptop. An email had come through from another tenant in a different building, a single woman. She explained that the rent increase would be difficult as she was the sole caregiver for her elderly mother. She didn't ask for a waiver, just a 3-month grace period to adjust her finances. I emailed Ira one sentence: "Grant her the extension and cap her increase at 5% for the year. C. M. G." I closed the laptop. I walked into the sterile, grey kitchen. On the wall, the family calendar they kept was still hanging. A red marker circled tomorrow's date. Florida Sloane had written, with 2 exclamation points and a little sun. The bags they had been so excited to pack were nowhere to be seen. The trip was, quite clearly, the last thing on their minds. The financial pressure was a thick, suffocating blanket in the house. Yet their immediate concern remained ridiculously, terrifyingly misplaced: the Florida vacation. 2 nights before the date circled on the calendar, my old phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Caleb, sent from the darkness of his own bedroom, undoubtedly hidden from Sloane. "Are you still planning on coming with us?" I stared at the blue bubble. He was not asking if I was okay. He was not apologizing for the stress, the eviction, or his wife's abuse. He was managing logistics. He was worried about an empty seat. I typed back on the same phone, leaving my new, secure Marigold phone silent in my purse. "I have my own plans. Caleb." The reply was almost instantaneous, but the tone had changed, becoming sharp and familiar. It was Sloane, either having grabbed his phone or dictating the response. "Good. Don't bother bringing your bags to the airport. No one is driving you. We won't have room." I set the phone down. The last, fragile thread of hope that my son might suddenly grow a spine had just snapped. The next morning, the day before the trip, the air in the house was static. Sloane, looking pale and ragged from nights of financial panic, was at the kitchen island, nursing a coffee. She saw me walking toward the front door, dressed for my part-time job at the archives. "I need you to run to the pharmacy," she snapped. It was not a request. "Get my prescription." I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, my new leather handbag heavy on my shoulder. I turned, slowly. "No." The word, quiet and small, landed in the silent kitchen with the force of a grenade. Sloane's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What did you say?" I said no. "Sloane, I have to get to work." Caleb, who was standing at the counter frantically shuffling through a stack of mail, late notices and windowed envelopes, froze. He looked at me, then at Sloane, his mouth forming a small O of panic. This was his moment, the pivot point. He could have said, "Mom's right, slow, she has a job," or "I'll get it on my way home." He did neither. He looked down at the bills, grabbed his briefcase, and walked straight out the front door, pushing past me without a single word. He fled. I met Ira during my lunch break, not at a diner, but in a small, windy park. He handed me a standard, sealed 9 by 12 envelope. "You probably won't need this," Maggie, he said, but I'd rather you have it and not need it. What is it? The audio files you provided, and, more importantly, the video footage from the property management's camera, the one in the public hallway outside your unit. It clearly recorded Sloane screaming at you last Tuesday, and the sound quality is excellent. It's just insurance. Insurance. That's what I was building. Before I returned to the townhouse, I drove to Lake Haven. The cemetery was quiet, the only sound the wind hissing through the pines. I stood at Arthur's grave, the simple granite marker. I'm not doing this to humiliate them. Arthur, I whispered, brushing a dead leaf off the cold stone. You and I, we protected him too much. We shielded him from every consequence. Now, I'm just going to force them to look in the mirror. I have to protect myself. That night, in the quiet of my guest room, I finalized my preparations. I sat at the small desk, the house silent around me. I printed fresh copies of every document. The Marigold Holdings transfer of ownership, signed by Arthur, notarized by Ira's office. The copy of Caleb and Sloane's original, subsidized lease agreement. The new, standardized lease they had ignored. The formal notice of non-renewal sent to Bright Bay Retail. I slipped them all into a crisp, letter-sized manila envelope. I called Ira on my new phone. Everything is ready. What about the witness? He's in place. Ira confirmed. Ron Bishop. He's a retired U.S. Marshal, a good friend. He knows airport security procedures inside and out. He'll be near Gate B12, just a traveller observing. He's an independent, third-party witness, in case Sloane decides to continue her public victim narrative. It's just a legal precaution. I understand, I said. I also confirmed the new personal liability insurance policy I had purchased. Every base was covered. I packed my single carry-on bag for Florida. The fog-grey suit was folded neatly on top. I looked at myself in the mirror. The face that looked back was no longer soft with grief. It was angular. Don't cry, I told myself. Do not cry on camera. This is not emotion. This is business. The next morning, I woke at 5 a.m. Their flight was at 8:30. My flight was at 8 o'clock. They were still asleep, exhausted by their own financial chaos. I slipped the small, white disc, an AirTag, into the interior lining of my suitcase. A little insurance in case Sloane, in a fit of performative rage, tried to lose my bag at check-in. I walked quietly down the stairs. I did not look back at the polished grey prison they had built for themselves. My Uber was waiting at the curb, exactly as scheduled, 45 minutes earlier than I knew they planned to leave. I got in, the car smelling of clean upholstery and possibility, and we pulled away into the pre-dawn light, heading for O'Hare. The air at Gate B12 was thick and still, tasting of stale coffee and anxiety. The white fluorescent lights of the terminal hummed, casting a flat, clinical glow on everything, making the bright Florida logo on the departure screen look garish. The public address system was a constant drone, a detached voice calling boarding groups for a different flight to Dallas. This was my stage, and the audience bored. Weary travellers waiting for their own departures was already seated. I saw them arrive, late and frantic, cutting through the line of families. Caleb was pushing the heavy luggage cart, his head down, his shoulders hunched, as if he could make himself invisible simply by staring at his shoes. Sloane was in the lead, her face pale and pinched. She saw me standing near the customer service desk, my single carry-on parked neatly beside me. She stopped dead. The momentum of the cart pushed Caleb forward until he almost bumped into her. He looked up, saw me, and froze. His face went from stressed to ashen. Sloane marched toward me, her heels clicking aggressively on the terrazzo floor. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice a low vibration of pure venom. I told you. You are not coming." Caleb remained by the cart, a good 10 feet away, paralyzed. He was a ship that had run aground, abandoned by its own captain. I offered Sloane a small, level smile. It was a gesture I had practiced in the guest room mirror, a smile that conveyed finality, not warmth. "Thank you for confirming that, Sloane," I said, my voice clear and carrying easily in the quiet tension. "I'm really not coming with you." A flicker of confusion crossed her face, quickly replaced by a sneer of triumph. She thought she had won. She thought I was here to plead, to make a scene, to be the pathetic mother-in-law. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "So you finally got the message good. Now get out of our way." She went to move past me, toward the podium, but her eyes caught on my handbag, which was open. The corner of my first-class ticket, the one for my flight, was visible. She mistook it for one of theirs. Her rage, which was always simmering just beneath the surface, boiled over. She thought I was trying to defy her, to sneak onto the flight. "What is that?" she snapped. Around us, the atmosphere had shifted. The man next to me, the one who had been reading a paper, lowered it slowly. A student sitting against the wall, her phone already in her hand, tilted the camera angle. The bored audience had found its entertainment. Sloane saw the phone. She saw the other phone. The realization that she was being watched did not stop her. It fueled her. I said, "You are not coming." She shrieked, and her hand moved, a blur of motion. It was not a shove. It was a full-handed swing, fast and vicious. The crack echoed in the suddenly silent gate area. My head snapped to the side, my glasses flying off my face and skittering onto the carpet. A white-hot, electric sting bloomed across my entire cheek. The crowd let out a collective, sharp gasp. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "She hit that old woman." The gate agent, a young woman with a deer-in-the-headlights expression, was already speaking into her walkie-talkie. "I need security at B12. I have an assault. I repeat, an assault at B12. Caleb finally moved, his voice a pathetic bleat. Sloane. No." A man in a dark suit airport security began moving quickly toward us. But another man, the one who had been reading the newspaper, simply stood up. He was tall, mid-50s, with a look of absolute calm. He didn't intervene. He just watched, his eyes missing nothing. He was my witness. He was Ira's retired marshal, Ron Bishop. My cheek was on fire. My hand was shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I bent down, retrieved my glasses, and put them back on, the world snapping back into sharp, ugly focus. "Ma'am?" the security guard said, arriving, out of breath. "Are you all right? Do you want to press charges?" Sloane had frozen, her hand still half raised, her face a mask of shock at her own action. I ignored the guard's question. I turned to Sloane, whose chest was heaving. "You just confirmed this in front of witnesses," I said. My voice was not a whisper. It was a statement. I reached into my new leather handbag and pulled out the thick, manila envelope. As if on cue, the speakers above us boomed. This is the final boarding call for Flight 4472 to Fort Myers. All remaining passengers must board now. It was their flight. The trap was set. The door was closing. Sloane looked at the gate, then at the security guard, then at me. "We have to go," she yelped, grabbing Caleb's arm. I looked at the gate agent and the guard. My voice was pure, reasonable calm. "Gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. That is my son and daughter-in-law. We seem to have a severe misunderstanding. I don't want them to miss their flight, but we cannot leave it like this." I pointed to the customer service desk 20 feet away. "Could we please step over there for 5 minutes, just to resolve this?" It was the perfect move. Public enough for witnesses, contained enough for a confrontation. The agent, desperate to clear the scene and board his flight, nodded frantically. "Yes, ma'am. Please, right this way." We huddled around the high counter of the customer service desk. It was an island of sterile white laminate, and we were the performers on its tiny stage. The security guard, a large man whose name tag read D. Hines, had his notepad open. The gate agent was frantically tapping on her screen, trying to manage the situation while closing out her flight. "We have to board," Sloane insisted, her voice tight and high. She was trying to regain control, to treat this as an annoyance. It was a misunderstanding. She's just confused. "I'm not confused. Sloane," I said. I reached into the manila envelope and pulled out the first document. I slid it across the counter. It was the court-stamped copy of the eviction filing, listing Caleb Ellison and Sloane Riley as the tenants in default. Sloane barely glanced at it. "We know about this. This is a dispute with our landlord. It has nothing to do with you." "This is the source of the dispute," I said, pulling out the second sheet, Caleb's original preferential lease. This was the agreement for $850 a month, subsidized by the owner. It became void upon his death. "We're fighting that," she snapped. "And this," I said, placing the third document on the pile, "is the non-renewal notice sent to Bright Bay Retail, terminating their lease in Concourse C due to non-payment." That stopped her. Her sneer vanished, replaced by a cold, dawning comprehension. She looked from the paper to my face, the connection finally sparking in her eyes. "How? How did you get that?" "Marigold Holdings doesn't renew leases with tenants who are in default," I stated flatly. "I believe that's why your consulting contract was terminated." The security guard, D. Hines, cleared his throat, bringing the focus back. "Ma'am," he said to me, "you were struck. I saw it. The witness over there." He motioned to Ron Bishop, who was now standing closer. "Confirmed it. I am filing a report. Assault in an airport terminal is a serious offense." He turned to Sloane. "I'll need your identification." "Ma'am." Sloane's face, which had been flushed with anger, drained of all color. "No, wait. You can't. It was a family matter. She's exaggerating." "Am I?" I asked. I looked at the guard. "This is part of a pattern." I pulled out my new phone, the Marigold phone. I didn't need the crowd to hear it. I just needed him to. I played the audio file from the hallway camera, keeping the volume low. Sloane's voice, high and sharp, filled the space between us. Always in the way. Cheap garbage. I swear to God. I will leave her at the curb. The guard's expression hardened. He stopped looking at me and focused entirely on Sloane. "Ma'am, your ID. Now." Caleb, who had been standing silent, a ghost watching his own life collapse, finally spoke. He was trembling. His eyes were wide, fixed on the stack of papers, the lease, the Bright Bay notice. He looked at me, and his voice was a choked, horrified whisper. "Mom, the townhouse, the airport lease. Mom, you are Marigold." The entire gate area seemed to fall silent. The hum of the lights, the distant boarding calls, all of it faded. I looked at my son, the boy I had protected, the man I had enabled. "Yes, Caleb," I said. "Your father left Marigold Holdings and all of its assets. To me." "No," Sloane shrieked, her voice cracking. "You're lying. That's impossible. You're nothing. I demand to speak to the real owner." "You are speaking to her." I pulled the final document from the envelope. It was the corporate resolution, the notarized transfer of managing rights. My name, Margaret Ellison, listed clearly as the sole managing member. I laid it on top of the pile. "And you should know, Sloane," I continued, my voice cold and precise, "that the Marigold franchise agreements for O'Hare have a very specific clause. Marigold Holdings reserves the right to ban any individual who harasses, threatens, or assaults an owner or representative of the company on the property Marigold controls. You just assaulted the owner. In concourse, see." She was trapped. There was no escape. I looked at my son, who was now weeping openly, thick sobs catching in his throat. I looked at his wife, her face a mask of pale, cornered rage. "Today is not the day I am left behind," I said, my voice non-type. "Today is the day you are left with the consequences." Mom, I'm sorry." Caleb choked, his hand reaching out for my arm. Sloane, in a final, reflexive act of cruelty, slapped his hand away. "Stop it. Caleb, don't you dare grovel." The speakers above us blasted, a sound of absolute finality. "This is the last and final boarding call for Flight 4472 to Fort Myers. The gate is now closing." The gate was closed. The final call had echoed and faded, leaving a heavy, stunned silence in its wake. All eyes the gate agent, Officer Hines, the few lingering passengers, and my witness. Ron Bishop were on me. Caleb was sobbing quietly, his shoulders shaking. Sloane was rigid, a statue of pure, distilled rage. I turned to the security guard, my voice a model of civic reasonableness. "Officer Hines, I appreciate your diligence. However, I do not wish to press criminal charges." Hines lowered his notepad. "Ma'am, you were assaulted. That's not a decision you can just—" "I understand." I interrupted him. "But this is a family matter that has escalated. I will decline to pursue this, provided two conditions are met immediately." Sloane's head snapped up. "Conditions?" I met her gaze, my own unwavering. "First, you will sign the legal agreement my lawyer has just emailed to this officer's precinct. It is a binding commitment of no contact, verbal or physical. Second," I pointed to the gate agent's podium, "you will apologize, using the microphone." "No," she hissed. "Absolutely not." "It's your choice, Sloane," I said. "A public apology, or a permanent criminal record for assault in a federal facility. I wonder how that will look on your next consulting application." Officer Hines, God bless him, understood his role perfectly. He stepped toward Sloane. "Ma'am, the offer is more than generous. You can apologize, or you can come with me. You have 10 seconds. I watched the war happen on her face, The primal rage fought with the cold, hard terror of real-world consequences. She looked at the closed gate, at the police officer, at the witnesses. She was trapped. With a movement so stiff she looked like she might break. Sloane walked to the podium. The gate agent, wide-eyed, switched on the microphone. A burst of static-filled feedback squealed. Sloane flinched, then leaned in. "I apologize to Margaret Ellison." Her voice was barely a whisper, but the microphone amplified it, making it sound thin, hollow, and utterly defeated. It hung in the air, a permanent, public record of her submission. "Thank you," I said, as if she had just passed me the salt. I turned my back on her. A complete dismissal. I now faced my son. "Caleb." He looked up, his face a miserable wreck of tears and snot. "Mum, I'm so sorry. I didn't—" "Stop," I said. It was not unkind, merely firm. "The eviction process will continue." He let out a choked sound. "But," I continued, "I am offering you one. Single path. I will authorize Ira to grant a 21-day extension. Not 30, 21. But only if you agree to 2 terms. Right now." "Anything." "Mum." "Yes. Anything. First, you will leave this terminal and go to a bank. You will open a new, individual account. You will legally and financially separate all your assets from Ms. Riley. Second, you will attend the mandatory financial counseling program that Ira has already selected for you. You will complete all sessions." He nodded, a frantic, jerking motion. "Yes, I'll do it. I'll do it all." "You dare betray me!" Sloane's voice was a venomous hiss. She lunged toward him. "After everything You're choosing her." "Ma'am." Officer Hines barked, stepping between them. "That's enough. You need to maintain your distance and your silence, or this agreement is void." Sloane froze, her hands clenched, but she was bound by the words she had just spoken. I reached into my handbag and pulled out the small, white gift card. I placed it in Caleb's shaking, damp hand. "This is for $500. It's for groceries. It is a one-time, non-refundable act of kindness. Do not use it for her. Do not use it for your debts. Use it to feed yourself." My marigold phone buzzed in my pocket. A new email. I looked at Officer Hines. "My lawyer, Ira Whitcomb, has just emailed this agreement, and my son's acceptance of the terms, to your office and to all parties. It is now on record." Hines nodded, satisfied. "I see it." Sloane, seeing her flight, her finances, and her husband all gone, made one last, desperate lunge. "So you win," she sneered at me, tears of rage in her eyes. "You're not even going. Why stop us? Why are you even here?" "I'm not stopping you from traveling, Sloane," I said. "I'm just leaving your life." I turned to the gate agent, who looked exhausted. "Thank you for your patience. I apologize for their behavior. I am, as it happens, on a different flight." Sloane was burning, trapped in a cage of her own making, bound by a legal agreement made in front of multiple witnesses. She was speechless. With the scene at Gate B12 concluded, I turned away from the wreckage of my son's marriage. Officer Hines was taking Sloane's driver's license, and Caleb was staring blankly at the $500 gift card in his hand. I picked up the handle of my own carry-on and walked away. I crossed the main terminal, the wheels of my bag making a quiet, steady whir on the floor. I did not run. I did not look back. I arrived at gate C19, on the opposite side of the concourse. The sign above it read, Fort Myers. The gate agent, a pleasant woman with a bright red blazer, was just making an announcement. "We will now be boarding Group 1 for our flight to Fort Myers." I walked up to her, my hand steady, and pulled out my passport and my single, first-class ticket, the one I had bought with my own company's points. I handed them to her. "Good morning," I said. "My name is Margaret Ellison. I'm traveling to Fort Myers, just ahead of my family." I felt a presence behind me. Sloane. She must have run, dragging Caleb with her, unable to let the final word be mine. Her voice was a ragged gasp, a sound of pure, unadulterated disbelief. "You? You had your own ticket. You don't need us." I didn't turn. I simply looked at the gate agent, who was scanning my passport, and smiled. Then I spoke to Sloane, my voice calm and final. "I never needed your permission. Sloane." "Group 1, you are welcome to board," the agent said, handing me back my documents. I stepped onto the red carpet of the jet bridge, leaving them behind me. I left them with their missed flight, their signed no-contact agreement, their 21-day eviction extension, and the shattered pieces of the life they had built on my quiet, subsidized foundation. "Mom," Caleb's voice called out, a choked, desperate sound. "Mom, I'll do it, I swear. I'll do every single thing you said." I paused at the threshold of the plane, but I did not turn around. I gave a single, short nod, more to myself than to him. "Let your actions speak," I murmured. And then I stepped inside. As I walked down the aisle, I could just see, through the terminal window, Officer Hines handing Sloane a new piece of paper. It was the temporary restraining notice, officially banning her from all Marigold-controlled properties in the airport. Her face, even from that distance, was a mask of dead, white shock. I passed the empty, unbranded shell of the Bright Bay retail kiosk. The logo had already been scraped off the glass. I made a mental note to tell Ira my new policy for that space would be to offer a discount to any tenant who provided a living wage and benefits for single parents caring for elderly relatives. I found my seat 1A. It was large, soft, and upholstered in dark blue leather. I slid my bag into the overhead compartment and settled in. I opened my handbag, checked for my wallet, and saw the small, folded note I kept inside, tucked beside the photo of Arthur. He was smiling, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The note was in my own handwriting, something I had written in my journal just last week: fairness, cruelty. I closed the purse with a decisive snap. As the plane began to taxi away from the gate, my new phone vibrated in my bag. I pulled it out. It was an email from Ira. Subject: good news. Maggie. Just received the signed lease from Ms. Alvarez. She sends her deepest thanks for the extension and the 5% cap. Your son's paperwork is also in my inbox. The clock is ticking. Enjoy the sun. The plane accelerated. A powerful, unstoppable force. It lifted off the runway, climbing steeply into the bright, cloudless sky. I looked down at the shrinking city, a map of my old life falling away. My hand went to my cheek. The fiery sting from Sloane's hand had already faded, leaving just a dull, residual ache. I was not here for revenge. I was just taking my position back. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm really curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can all connect and share our thoughts. And if this story moved you, please consider subscribing to Grandma's Family Diary. Give this video a like and hit that hype button to help it get seen by more people.